Hello, my name is John Swedenborg. I'm a current senior. My major is religious studies and I'm a pre-med student. For my topic today for discussion is coral reefs. I chose this because I'm currently getting my scuba diving license. I spent 5 hours today and yesterday, and I will spend it tomorrow with my sister and my girlfriend scuba diving in Miami in Key Biscayne. Also, reefs are huge. Like the Florida Reef is right in our backyard. It's the fifth largest coral reef in the world. It supports over 70,000 jobs and it generates $6.3 billion in tourism each year. Unfortunately, since 1970, 90% of it has declined due to various factors, but most importantly, it's due to white syndrome, which is it's a less fancy word for stony coral tissue loss disease, which is in the last decade killed over 20 coral species just in the local Florida Reef. The Florida Reef is just in our backyard. Also, coral reefs are all over and a big part of the US. They provide the Miami a lot of good benefits. They provide protections against hurricanes and floods and storms, and they offer a lot to us. It's right in our backyard. I thought it's something that it would be an interesting topic to talk about, and I'm getting more into it, and comes with scuba diving is learning about the coral reefs because they are such an important part of our ecosystem, but also important part of the world. So I'm just gonna start with the basics. Coral reef is an ecosystem. It's made up of thousands of individual animals called polyps. Their skeletons are joined together in a cohesive structure to form a colony, and this colony is known as a coral. Each of the individual particles or polyps have a simple structure with just a mouth that takes in food and takes out waste, and then also has tentacles. So these bring in food, defend it from predators and stuff like that. So the importance of coral reefs, though, in general, is that globally, in a global sense, 1 billion people depend on coral reefs for food, protection, and jobs. This touches, 15% of people, but there's also a lot of other ways that it touches people's lives. So I'm gonna go over the various contributions that it gives to people and why it makes it important. Is an important thing that we protect and something that should be a priority for us and for our laws and for our politicians. So the first one and the biggest one is biodiversity. So coral reefs actually cover a very small subset of the world's oceans. They only cover 1% of the ocean floor. But that being said, they host at least 25% of the world's marine life. So we're talking about a fourth of the entire ocean's life is in coral reefs, 1% of it. So it is such a small thing, but that being said, the density is so much. So it even makes more mathematical sense to focus on them within wow, it's only 1% of surface area. We should take a priority over the other ones just because you get the most benefit out of it. Also, interesting fact, coral reefs exceed rainforests in their biodiversity, which rainforests I think are technically known as one of the most biodiverse things in the planet, at least the way that they're kind of portrayed and the way that they're talked about. So knowing that coral reefs actually exceed that should kind of put it in perspective a little more. And this biodiversity creates stable ecosystems and benefits for all members of the ecosystem and also for the planet. So biodiversity is just a huge thing. Just the more biodiversity you have, the better it's able to withstand any negative natural disasters or any trends across the board, right? Because you just have more species able to adapt to it. So therefore, it's the best long-term solution is biodiversity. I talked on this earlier, but coral reefs also offer coastal protection, which is huge because it offers natural protection to natural disasters. So especially since we're in Miami on the coast, right? Not being affected by floods or storms is a huge thing, and otherwise we'd have a lot of flooding, and most of us probably wouldn't have homes if we didn't have these coral reefs right outside in our backyards. Also, from an economic perspective, the annual value of flood risk reduction provided by the US coral reefs is more than $1.8 billion. So they save a lot of money for the US. So having them is a really good thing. Obviously food, these coral reefs host 25% of marine life. They give us a lot of food. A lot of fishing comes from around the coral reef regions. And another interesting one is from a medicine perspective. According to a study, more than half of all new cancer research drugs focus on marine organisms, many of which can be found in coral reefs. So cancer drugs, marine organisms, huge thing. We don't even know necessarily what the benefits are and what we're able to find down there, but the thing is that marine organisms do offer a lot of valuable things for us. And economically, it is estimated that coral reefs provide $375 billion per year around the world in goods and services, and at least 94 countries and territories benefit from reef tourism. So, at least for the economy, we're losing a lot of GDP. A lot of countries are losing their revenue. A lot of people are losing their livelihood and income just based off the fact of coral reefs kind of slowly degrading over time. And this degradation is caused by a lot of factors, but they can be put into two broad categories of threats. So the first one is global. The first one is just warming temperatures, right? Just big trend of warming temperatures is a really bad thing. This causes coral bleaching. So coral bleaching is what happens is when corals release their algae, which is a food source, but also an organism that they have a symbiotic relationship with. This causes because corals have a naturally very small temperature range tolerance. So with it just rising up, they get overheated, they release their algae, they become white or bleached. And the bleaching can directly cause them, but also just leaves them more vulnerable for storms and for natural disasters, but also for disease. The second biggest thing, just on a global sense, is ocean acidification. So the ocean absorbs almost 25% of CO2 emitted by fossil fuels. So everyone thinks it gets emitted into the atmosphere and just fossil fuels exist up there. That's not really, there's a relationship where it goes into the ocean, goes back up, and they kind of create this balance. And the unfortunate thing about CO2 emissions in fossil fuels directly for coral reefs is that the CO2 emissions make it so coral reefs have weaker skeletons and therefore weaker coral structures. In fact, research shows that when exposed to high levels of CO2, corals stop being productive and the risk of bleaching increases up to 50%. Another huge thing is sea level rise. So just with water levels going up, the water is now up, and also corals are now a little further away from the surface. So therefore it's a little hard for them to receive sunlight, which is necessary for their survival. And also that comes with kind of all of these sea level rise, warming temperatures, all these kind of more global, in a sense, natural trends, at least that we're facing today. It just increases natural disasters, right? Like more catastrophic volatile events such as hurricanes. It damages the coral reefs, makes it an issue. Now for the second of the broad categories is local sources. So big one, unsustainable bad fishing practices just strip the reef of necessary species, cornerstone species that help and maintain environmental order and keep the algae in check and can damage the corals. So it's just one of those where when you remove big pieces of an ecosystem, there's gonna be negative events for everyone involved. Another huge one is pollution and land runoff. So 25% of coral reefs around the world are affected by agricultural runoff. So runoff includes sedimentation, negative chemicals, pathogens, toxins, trash, plastic, microplastics, just all the things that people kind of, they want to get away, they kind of want to get rid of. Unfortunately, they find their way into the oceans. A lot of times from agricultural sources, but just from the fact that it's somewhere to dump that's not necessarily in front of you. Not the coolest, but one of the most interesting ones I would say is microplastics, just because of their prevalence. The impact of microplastics is huge. We don't necessarily fully understand the effects, but they are everywhere we look. Every continent in the entire world has microplastics in it, even Antarctica, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And there is kind of an issue going on with the studies where you kind of aren't able to fully conduct them to the best way possible because there is a lack of control groups just because every single person has them in their system. And also they've been found in human brains in studies, and also microplastics have the ability to bypass the blood-brain barrier and exist in the brain, which is negative because the blood-brain barrier is there to prevent toxic chemicals from going inside of it. And it's a very sensitive organ with a bunch of neurons and a bunch of complex things going on. So it's horrible to have it in the brain. Another interesting thing about microplastics is that studies have detected microplastics in 100% of tested human placentas. So there's not a single person born out there that will not have microplastics in them, or some portion of their body from development, from fertilization onwards. Crazy thing, but we think about it also, we're not the ones with the giant patches of plastic out in the middle of the ocean. We're not the life existing right beneath it, where we don't have to deal with any of that. And we're still affected in such a significant way, and it's such a prevalent thing. It's not crazy logical conclusions to therefore think that whatever issues we have and whatever issues we find on it, it's only going to be impacting the marine life around us significantly more. So overall, the biggest problem that's facing us is because of all these factors is that over 75% of the world's coral reefs are currently being threatened. This number will be to 90% in 2030, and then it will be to 100%. So 100% of reefs across the world will be threatened by 2050 if we do not do something now. A lot of this has to do with ocean acidity increasing. So ocean acidity has increased 30% since the Industrial Revolution, which is a huge number. But also it will increase an additional 40% above the current levels by the end of the century, unless there's a bunch of changes done in policy. So there have been a couple of things that the US government has done policy-wise to kind of try to help the reefs out and kind of allow a way for things to develop in a healthy way where now these coral reefs are not protected and they're able to exist, and it benefits everyone, it benefits everything in life, so in our life and in the world. So it kind of is a good thing for us to be looking into. So a big one is the CRCA, which is the Coral Reef Conservation Act. This was in 2000. It's basic: preserve, protect coral reefs, study coral reefs, promote better management. A big overarching one is just the Endangered Species Act, which is from 1973. The main parts are that each listed species has designated critical habitat and a recovery plan, which includes management plans, target population levels, and implementation schedules. So that's a really big one. The reefs are, a lot of species within the reefs and a lot of coral reef species are endangered, so they do have to go through that process, but there is plans in place where they're trying to get them to certain target population levels and implement schedules, so timelines for them to kind of benefit from. A huge one is the MSA. So the MSA governs fish policies within the US and within like the US owned fishing areas. I think it's like within like 200 nautical miles offshore, give or take. So this was originally signed in 1976, but there's been a couple overhauls of it, a couple redoings of it. So 1996, the government established that on board there needs to be government agents for a certain number of fishing vessels. It mandates to reduce the amount of bycatch, and it mandates to reduce the amount of overfishing. In 2006, there was a call to end all overfishing in the US by 2010. Also better protection of deep sea coral habitats, and the improvement in data collection for fisheries. So that was a huge one. And then another huge one was the NMSA. So this had the purpose of designating important marine environments as sanctuaries for environmental, historical, cultural reasons. There's 18 right now. A huge one that is on the other side of the US is around Hawaii. It's called the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, and this covers ocean areas and coral reefs around the Hawaiian Islands and the Pacific Ocean. That was signed by President Bush in 2006. So with that in mind, what can individuals do? A huge one is just use less water, causes less runoff and therefore pollution for marine life. Use non-chemical sunscreen, doesn't damage the coral reefs, keeps the waters healthy for them. Don't touch coral reefs if diving, and just to overall use less plastics and chemicals. So that's all I have for my presentation on coral reefs. I hope you